Go Jump in the Pool by Gordon Korman. Is this considered our fault? According to Elmer Drimsdale, sir, said Bruno, we have $2,550.90. Elmer says that's 10.2036 of what we need, leaving us still to collect $22,449.10. Mr. Sturgeon smiled. I would not presume to question the calculations of Elmer Drimsdale. Well, boys, I find it remarkable that you have actually managed to raise 10% of the money in so short a time. And that does not include Anderson's jelly beans. A truck arrived this morning with another 75 pounds of them, representing second and third prizes in the Happy Elephant contest. One can only hope that none of the other students were quite as thorough as the Anderson boy. Well, sir, said Bruno reflectively, every little bit helps. They say the first 10% is the hardest. The other 90 should come easy as pie. There was a low moan from Boots. Mr. Sturgeon settled back in his chair. May I take that to mean you have another brilliant scheme on the drawing board? Yes, sir, said Bruno eagerly. You see, we have lots of really good workers, but the ideas are coming only from Melvin and me. I was thinking of something like an individual effort day when anyone from either school could set up a booth and make money any way he or she wanted. It would be really great, sir, Boots added as he felt Bruno's elbow at his ribs. There would be a lot more kids participating. And we'd make a fortune, Bruno concluded. Mr. Sturgeon thought it over. He had checked with the teachers and had been assured that all students were maintaining their standards. As a matter of fact, grades were a little higher and the number of misdemeanors lower. None of the students wanted to be assigned extra tutoring or punishment for fear of missing something to do with the fundraising campaign. All things considered, the campaign had been very good for the school. I shall allow an individual effort day, the headmaster said at last. However, you two will be the judges of what is and is not suitable. You are aware of the standards of MacDonald Hall. What date do you have in mind? A week from Saturday, sir, said Bruno. That gives everybody 10 days to prepare. All right, then, good day. For the next 10 days, MacDonald Hall became the strangest place around. The boys hardly talked to each other for fear of accidentally giving away their plans to someone else. Posters advertising individual effort day were all over the hall and missed scrimmages too. The woodshop vibrated to the sound of hammers and saws, building booths and mysterious contraptions. Out of Elmer Drimsdale's room came strange noises. A whole new lingo sprang up. Get out of my room and close the door behind you. Who took my monkey wrench? That's my history notes you just poured all that grease on. What the heck is Drimsdale doing? If you steal my ID, I'll hit you with this board. Turn up the radio so Kevin won't be able to hear what we're saying. It took me 5 days to build what you just sat on. Oh no, it collapsed. Elmer, come out of there. A great deal of spying took place and a great deal of counter-espionage as well. Outside Sidney Rampolsky's room, Pete Anderson was caught lurking in the bushes with a periscope. He got a crutch over the head for his efforts. When Mark Davies opened his closet door one night, there stood Perry Elbert with a notepad, pencil, and guilty face. Wilbur Hackenschlemmer received a nasty black eye while peering through the keyhole into Rob Adams's room. Rob threw open the door too suddenly for Wilbur to get out of the way. The only boy untroubled by the spying was Elmer Drimsdale. Before starting on his project, Elmer had efficiently booby-trapped all entrances to his room, and everyone knew about it. Bruno, mostly out of curiosity, had tried to get inside and could attest to the fact that room 201 was a fortress. At the window, he was sprayed with water and hopelessly tangled in a net. At the door, he received a jarring electric shock. With the responsibility for law and order resting on their shoulders, Bruno and Boots were greatly relieved when the big day finally arrived. Mr. and Mrs. Sturgeon stepped out onto their front porch into the warm autumn sunshine. William, did you bring money? Yes, Mildred, her husband replied. I'm beginning to feel that I am personally supplying the pool fund. Must you always be so cranky about everything, she sighed. The boys and girls have worked so hard for all this. Let's enjoy it. The first booth they came to was operated by Mark Davies, who was doing a big business. A sign proclaimed, "Your name in the headlines, 50 cents, using the MacDonald Hall newspaper. Mark was printing custom headlines. As the headmaster watched, Chris walked away well pleased with his headline, which said, Christopher Talbot spends 10 days locked in meat freezer. Mr. Sturgeon finally emerged with the line carrying a newspaper which read, or Mrs. Sturgeon finally emerged from the line carrying a newspaper which read, William S. Sturgeon wins heavyweight championship. She was giggling. He knew right then and there that she was planning to spend money at every single booth so that no one would feel left out. They stopped to buy some cookies from Diane Grant, who was in charge of a baked goods booth. Scrim cookies, no doubt, Mr. Sturgeon commented. Why, how did you know, sir? Exclaimed Diane. Lucky guess, smiled the headmaster. Next, they came to a display called Sponge Throw. Boots O'Neill was sitting in a chair with a bucket full of wet sponges in front of him. 6 yards away stood Bruno Walton behind a sheet of plywood. Bruno's head peeped through a hole in the wood. Would you like to try, sir? Boots asked. For a nickel, you can throw a sponge at Bruno. Mr. Sturgeon instantly produced a quarter. I'll start with 5, he said, positively grinning. With a swift overhand motion, he threw 5 direct hits that left Bruno sputtering. I played a little cricket at the university, he explained with great satisfaction. Wow, said Boots admiringly. I'm glad it was Bruno's turn instead of mine. Oh, said Mr. Sturgeon, you have a turn too? In that case, I shall be back. As the headmaster stepped out of the way, Perry Elbert was next in line. Perry handed Boots a $1 bill. He did not ask for change. The headmaster and his wife went along, stopping at every display. Mr. Sturgeon had his caricature done at Chris Talbot's booth, and was a little shocked to see how cold and stern his eyes were. Mrs. Sturgeon brought a bouquet of paper flowers from some of Miss Scrimmage's girls. They each paid a dime entry fee and went in to view Marvin Trimble's rock collection. They had just bought lemonade from 2 boys when they heard a familiar scream. Mr. Sturgeon nudged his wife. It's Miss Scrimmage. She's in there. He pointed to a tent with a sign on it that announced Kathy's Chamber of Horrors. As they approached, Kathy Burton came out of the tent, leading a hysterical Miss Scrimmage. They weren't real snakes, Miss Scrimmage, the girl was saying, and the great white shark was just an illusion. It's all right, really it is. You're safe now. Eventually, Miss Scrimmage calmed down and joined the Sturgeons on their tour of the grounds. By far the most popular booth was Elmer Grimsdale's. The most carefully guarded secret in the whole affair turned out to be an enormous coin-operated pinball machine. Oh, look, William, isn't that marvelous? Exclaimed Mrs. Sturgeon. You must play it. I consider it gambling, Mildred, her husband replied primly. I do not approve of any form of gambling. Miss Sturgeon slapped the dime into his hand and pushed him up to Elmer's wonderful machine. Don't be a fuddy-duddy, she whispered. Play. Mr. Sturgeon inserted the dime and the machine sprang to life. Bells rang, lights flashed, and the ball sped around the board. 20 minutes and many dimes later, Mrs. Sturgeon approached her husband. William, she said in a low tone, you're hogging the machine. There's a long lineup behind you. Mr. Sturgeon did not even turn around. There is an art to pinball, Mildred, he said abstractly as he operated the flippers. It requires complete concentration. If you hadn't disturbed me, I would have won a free game. Oh, come away from there, she exclaimed, dragging him off by the arm. There's so much more to see. Miss Scrimmage paid 25 cents for a grab bag package, which turned out to be a complete set of bubblegum cards covering the 1976 World Series. She kindly assured the worried vendor that she was perfectly satisfied with her prize. After all, she said, I have been a Rocket Richard fan for years. Wilbur Hackenschlemmer was doing very well as the inventor and operator of the afternoon's only ride. This consisted of a padded barrel on top of a small hill. The rider would climb into the barrel and Wilbur would roll it down the hill into a pit of sand. The only mishap of the day occurred when the rider, Coach Flynn, sneezed in transit and put the barrel off course. It missed the sand pit, rolled across the lawn, bounced over the ditch, hurtled across the highway, where it narrowly missed a collision with a sightseeing bus and came to rest in Miss Scrimmage's chrysanthemum bed. An enthusiastic Mr. Flynn emerged from the barrel to find, to his amazement, that individual effort day was gone. Had it ended during his ride? He was set straight when Wilbur rushed up, concerned for the safety of his barrel. Mr. Sturgeon became annoyed watching his wife and Miss Scrimmage throw nickels into a saucer attempting to win a prize. He nudged them aside. Here is how it is done, he said quietly. He threw and missed again and again. I am going to do it, he said between clenched teeth. If I have to spend $100. It only cost him $2. His prize was a huge gift-wrapped carton, which he was obliged to lug around for the remainder of the afternoon. They paid $0.25 each to see a puppet show run by 2 McDonald Hall boys. The show was about a wicked headmaster who had a swimming pool and a nice headmaster who didn't. In the end, the king took the pool away from the wicked headmaster and gave it to the nice one. The nice headmaster and his nice boys lived happily ever after. Mr. Sturgeon was extremely amused. The wicked headmaster is Hartley of York Academy, he explained to Miss Scrimmage. Oh, and who is the nice headmaster? She asked innocently. Mrs. Sturgeon Mrs. Sturgeon bought a sign hand-lettered by a talented associate of Chris Talbot. Don't be a fool, with an E at the end. Support ye pool, also with an E at the end. The afternoon was drawing to a close, and the Sturgeons, accompanied by Miss Scrimmage, began to wend their way toward home, when suddenly the headmaster remembered his promise to return to the sponge throw. This time Bruno was taking the money, and Boots was the target. Mr. Sturgeon produced another $0.25 and picked up the first sponge. Oh, this is violent, said Miss Scrimmage. I think I'll go over and see how the bake table is doing. Mr. Sturgeon wound up and caught Boots flush in the face. Deadly, Bruno cheered. Mr. Sturgeon reached for another sponge and took careful aim. Now that he had a reputation to protect, he did not want to miss. He brought his arm forward and let fly just as Miss Scrimmage wandered absent-mindedly into the line of fire. Splat! The sopping sponge hit her right in the side of the head. Or on the side of the head. Bruno raced out with the towel and caught the teetering Miss Scrimmage. Sir, called Boots anxiously, is this considered our fault? No, said Mr. Sturgeon with just a trace of amusement in his voice. I did that myself. Determined to get his money's worth, he threw 3 more direct hits at Boots. The crowd began to thin out and the booths began to close. Before the dinner bell rang, individual effort day had drawn to a successful end. Mr. Sturgeon struggled into the house with his enormous prize. This had better be something good, he said sourly. It cost me over $2. Well, open it, dear, said his wife. Let's see what you won, in an attempt to deposit the bulky package on the coffee table in the living room. Mr. Sturgeon lost his grip on it. It hit the floor with a bang. There was movement within the box, and suddenly a voice, muffled by wrapping paper, said, Hi there, my name is Jack. Mildred, how did this happen? I knew you hated it, William, she explained, so I gave it to the boys for individual effort day. And I won it, he said softly. I won it again. Yes, dear. Take it away, Mildred, the headmaster ordered. Put it where I won't have to see it or hear it ever again. $1,437.39, exclaimed Bruno Walton to Boots and Elmer as he dropped the last penny into bucket number 6. That's the best we've ever done. Elmer produced a $10 bill. The Cool Cola Company sent me this, he said proudly. It's a special consolation prize. They said my jingle was the most unusual one in the history of the company. Here's Sidney's $2, Boots put in, dropping 2 $1 bills into the bucket. It seems he colored the magic peanut in the ad for Ace Nuts. Elmer looked thoughtful. We now have $4,000.29, which is 16 point. All right, Elmer, Bruno cut in. We know we're still short, but wasn't it a great day? It sure was, said Boots, especially when Miss Scrimmage got hit by a wet sponge and the fish couldn't even blame it on us. I wonder, mused Bruno, if we could possibly start building the pool now. We could give the builder our $4,000.29 as a down payment and pay off the rest later. Much later, said Boots, about 200 years later. Before a mortgage company would consider your application, said Elmer, you would need to show a steady source of income. Presently, you are too much of a risk. Oh, well, grab a couple of buckets, you guys, ordered Bruno, not in the least discouraged. Let's get this money to the fish for banking. He grinned at Boots. You've got a letter to write. Oh, no, moaned Boots. Not another one. Your parents haven't heard yet about the fabulous history class you attended recently, Bruno told him. And if they don't hear about it, it could mean the turkey farm. Let's hurry, Boots agreed. There was a loud crash at the door. They're here, they're here, they're here. I won, someone cried. Bruno, Boots, and Elmer rushed out of the room to see what was going on. They were nearly trampled in a stampede. I won, cried the voice again. They're here with my refrigerator. Bruno's eyes met Boots's. Let's go. They dashed out of the dormitory, leaving a confused Elmer Grimsdale in charge of the money buckets. And that's the end of chapter 10.